JJ, welcome. So happy to have you here. This conversation is a long time coming.
I'm so excited to have this conversation. Yeah, we talked about this for years, probably, or at least several months, and now it's happening.
Yeah, I think I've known you for probably like a decade, wouldn't you
A
say?
decade.
Isn't that
Yeah, a
crazy?
decade.
Yeah, and it's funny because we met through couch surfing. And it
Yeah.
was through a shared love of travel. And I've always just really loved your energy is like super infectious.
Okay.
More than anyone else I can think of that I know, you have such a strong desire to learn and grow and not just like read books and learn and understand things intellectually, but really to learn something through applying it and practicing it and mastering it. And I don't know anybody else that is. When I first met you, you would do this like every month. You were devoted to learning something different for the whole month. You would focus on it. And this was a broad range of things. Because I can remember like one month it was juggling, and then it was speed reading, and then it was meditation, just kind of a whole broad range of
Mm.
everything you could ever think of. How did
It's
that?
like going through a bazaar. It's like going through a bazaar and you start just picking things you like and you start putting it in your cart, right? It was something like that.
Yeah, what age did you start trying that?
Actually 11 years ago right now, right? So theoretically, if I'm from 85, I'm 40 theoretically. That means 29 or so that I started. And I did not realize that that was the way to get my mind hooked into this dopamine consumption, but that thankfully had a purpose because we're all getting into nowadays, especially with technology, getting hooked into what I would call a lower quality dopamine sources, right? So in my case, thankfully, my brain got hooked into this thing of learning in a structured way, not just aspirational.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I mean, really, when we're talking about spirituality, my perspective is that we are all here wanting to learn and grow through this human embodied experience. And so you're just doing sort of the fast track of like many, many lifetimes,
Yeah.
many, many lessons in one lifetime, perhaps. I sometimes would tell people that, like, oh, being an actor could be a fast forward kind of way of evolving because each time someone plays a role, it'd be kind of like a separate lifetime. And so something like that, like you're experiencing, or at least as far as the learning something, how to do something, a method, or understanding something. But of course, a huge part of our human experience of growth comes through our interactions and through learning through our personal experiences, not just learning techniques and methods, wouldn't you say?
The funny thing is that in order to learn, to really learn, we need to have interaction with another human. Otherwise, how do we know that we're doing it the right or the proper way? There is no way. It's all in connection with everyone, right? If I would give you a tool, if you would find a spoon and you use this spoon to just, I don't know, try to crack a coconut, and you think like this is an amazing tool to crack a coconut. It makes no sense, but according to you, it makes sense until someone else will come and say, "Well, you can use it to also scoop your soup," right? So those kind of things only happen in interactions, and we are teaching each other functional or adaptive or maladaptive ways to cope with reality. And it's interesting that you mentioned this thing of being an actor because T, you have known me for a decade, so you've seen many facets, many literally identities. And one of the things that people don't know is that I used to be a digital nomad. Within that decade, I became a digital nomad. So every location that I would arrive to live for 2, 3 months, I decided to change my identity.
I didn't know that piece. I remember the digital nomad phase because I was like, oh, envious. Like, yeah, I wish I could figure out how to do that. But I didn't know you just mean you intentionally were choosing kind of different personality traits, or were you even going by different
Personality
names?
traits.
Or,
Personality
oh,
traits. Personality traits is the same guy called JJ, but with different personality traits. And this is the beauty, right? Because I used to drop myself into locations where no one knew me. Therefore, I could even have the chance of knowing different aspects of myself, which later became to realizations like, oh, this identity is like having this white T-shirt. I can put it outside and then put me another T-shirt, and then according based on that behavior or the other behavior. But at the end of the day, identity becomes just a costume, a disguise for something that is deeper than that, right?
I love that perspective. There's a sense of playfulness and a sense of flexibility and fluidity that I think that sometimes adulting that we sometimes
Yeah.
lose. And then I don't know, what do you think about now, especially I guess I can't remember particularly back then if you were heavily using your social media, but do you think it's harder to recreate ourselves in that way when everyone has access to whatever this JJ was through your social media presence and so forth, that if you were to try to be a different JJ for the next 6 months in Bali or something, everybody'd be like, no, no, I know who JJ is because they've been following your social media. Do you think you could still pull that off
Wow.
now?
But that's a very interesting thing. What I'm noticing actually, because at that time I was more consuming social media than being a continuous producer. Nowadays, I produce a lot of content for social media, for podcasts, for the newsletter, etc. Right? And so, in those regards, it's interesting to even look at myself, let's say, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and see like, oh, look at that JJ over that time. Oh, he was so cute. Like, oh, he was so cute at that time, right? First of all, it's the self-reflection of myself in those stages, and you can notice the belief system that JJ used to go by at that time, and maybe at that time that was a functional something that served him. Now, something interesting that I've noticed, and going back to your question, is that yeah, people, and including ourselves, myself, when I see people online and something resonates with me, we start projecting parts of us into, oh, I know this person, but it's not something that we're doing rationally, cognitively, right? It's like we're tricking our neurobiology and our psyche to find closeness with a person, and so we start creating this image of this person in ourselves. Now, this is interesting. Nowadays, sometimes you've seen this. I'm walking somewhere, and then like, oh, are you JJ? I'm like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, I love your sessions. They will tell me something like that. And it's so nice because for the majority of people that say or do that, it's because I am mirroring something that they admire in themselves. And I just become a mirror and I just remind that. And it's like, oh, thank you for seeing this in me. This is also in you. Thank you for seeing that, right? And so with social media, that is getting amplified. Therefore, if a person connects with a person that they admire on social media, let's put it a profile on social media, an avatar on social media, they sometimes forget that that avatar is going to mutate, is going to evolve, is going to change. And sometimes we get hooked into one snapshot of this avatar thinking that it's the all end of this personality when it's not. So that's a trick that we are all navigating, learning to navigate a society.
Yeah, and you made me think you made me think of something too because so like I said, initially I knew you as Travel JJ and then
Yeah.
like the polymath JJ, right? The guy who's the Renaissance
Thank you.
man who
Yeah.
learning and
Thank you.
knows all sorts of different things. And then one day my clients would come and I was like, oh, what prompted you to schedule this past life regression or some kind of session? And they
Yeah.
would be like, I had this amazing breathwork session at Casa de Luz. This guy named JJ. I was like, wait, JJ? And then I kept getting it from several different people. And I was like, oh my gosh, it was so fun. It was before then that we started discussing spiritual things, but
Yeah.
not initially. It was like initially I didn't know that side of you. And then over time, it started to filter in more. But then it was really cool to kind of see you step into this role as a facilitator, as a mentor, as a guide. Because I always saw that in you. And I don't know if you remember, but even early on, I used to say, because your energy is very infectious. And I would say, like, JJ, you've got to be mentoring people or sharing. You're learning all of these things. You need to share it. And you used to push back about your language,
Yeah.
about like, oh, my
Yeah.
accent, people aren't going to be able to. I'm like, I can understand you perfectly fine. I don't think that's an issue. I think
Yeah.
that's in your head. Tell me about your perspective of that evolution.
So this is beautiful that you're asking that because the identity that you're seeing, and I think last time we were having dinner, it died a few months ago, and now this is a new identity that is emerging, but it is less attached. I'm less attached to the identity as if I would be less attached to this T-shirt, as I mentioned. So what happened at that time when I was doing that kind of devouring information and like just jumping into topic to topic and learning as much as I could, came from something interesting. At that time, that identity had a profound sense of lack or not enoughness. I need to keep learning. It's like, no, 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 my accent is not good enough. I'm not eloquent enough. I was always finding some enoughness. That's the reason I was devouring information in hopes that the next book, the next course, the next mentor, the next retreat was going to give me enoughness to take action into something. So I remember one of my good friends, Ori, for at least for 2 years, he was telling me, hey, you told me that you're going to do this, that you're preparing yourself. When are you going to do it? And that is when, like, that positive pressure helped me to, like, okay, he's right. Because if I am just consuming information and not sharing, it makes no sense. I mean, it's a waste of time. And so the act of sharing turned into a very courageous act. First of all, not knowing first how to share, then who to share it with, and then the third one would be in what format to share it with. Because we all dislike the annoying guy who comes and thinks he's a Mr. Know-it-all and he wants to drop a comment on something that you and I have had those conversations when I was that guy.
Guy or girl,
Right.
women do that
Or
same
girl.
thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
So
love
that
what
was that was a seven shift.
Yeah, I love what you just shared because I really think that now I'm sure listeners, regular listeners of this podcast are tired of me talking about the Aquarian age. And yet it's a huge part of why all of our souls incarnated at this time to be part of this big spiritual shift. That's my perspective. And so the Aquarian age, part of it is about us each sharing our own unique gifts, being our authentic self in a way that is good for the collective. So it's like balancing the individual and the collective and honoring our unique individualism while utilizing it for the collective. And so there's many more people right now who are trying to figure out how they can be their authentic self and feel safe. And that whole like not enoughness, I know
Yeah.
it's rampant in our society, but it's probably rampant all around the world. And it's something that we're all working through as souls, as humans on the planet. And so these pieces that you were just mentioning, I think that that's the piece of how we can learn to be our authentic self and feel safe expressing it. It's through learning how to discern, like you're saying, who to share it with, when to share it, how to share it so it will be best received. I think a lot of us, I'm generalizing, but I know some of, when I say my people, I mean people who are similar to me. We've had past lives where we were burned at the stake for sharing our truth, right? And so there can be
Okay.
deep,
Right.
deep subconscious fear where we're not going to get murdered for saying something that's not the mainstream, and yet it feels like we are. I can remember putting up a page where I had some of my channeled messages, and I felt like my
Yeah.
heart was racing, and if nobody even saw it. I had to really share it with people, even for anybody to find it. But I remember just putting it out there, how scary it felt, and it was not rational at all. But I think so many people are really wanting to be here embodied on the planet as their unique beingness, as their soul, sharing their gifts, and yet needing to figure out how they can move forward without grappling with this fear.
It's interesting that you mentioned this in the way that I used to start, or the way that I started with putting content out there. It wasn't this massive thing. Like nowadays, you see me having this conversation like this. A few years ago, I was like, I was like stuttering, right? And I remember that one of the key points in shedding the previous identities, and something I want to point out is I love that you're talking about past lives. Those past lives are not only in time, it could be within the same time, same lifetime, right? I work with leaders of organizations who are changing identities. It's like killing or allowing an identity to die in some aspect, to reborn in a new way. I'm going to talk about later. Oh, now that I think about it, but we can talk about my metaphor of the matrioskas, the Russian dolls. Did I
Hmm.
tell you about that one? Right. So the matryoshka is this little doll that has another one inside, on top of that, another one on top of another one on top of. I see the identity growing like that, but it's interesting. It's not just growing egotistically. It's like shedding layers that allow a growth of the consciousness or this spiritual aspect to be more in tune with the rest of what's going on internally and externally, without disregarding the previous versions. without disregarding them. Now, going back to how I started, because I also had that fear. And I remember that I said, I'm going to do a 7-day challenge. I'm gonna put every day for 7 days something on, at that time, Facebook. Long, long time ago, when Facebook was still a thing, right? I'm gonna put something on Facebook, but I was so self-conscious that I said I'm gonna put it on stories, and I think that the stories lasted for 15 seconds for 24 hours, and then they went off, right? So I remember I bought a tripod. Buying the tripod was in the first place like so scary. I bought a tripod. Okay, I got a tripod. I put the camera. I know what I'm gonna say, and I put the phone there. It's like, okay, 3, 2, 1, record, and like, hi, I'm JJ, and today we're going to talk about something like this. I don't remember what it was, right? And I'm sweating bullets through my skin. Okay, it's down there. I get it. Now the fear. The fear went to the tip of my finger when I had to press send. I remember I clicked send and I jumped out of the opposite end of the cell phone as if there was going to be an explosion, which nothing happened, right? And I said, oh, wow. And I think that 2 people watched my story, my mom and someone else. I said, great, right? But then since I had this commitment of doing 7 days, then the next day there was still fear, but less fear. Third, less fear. Fourth, less fear. And I was changing the topics, which is thankfully something that I do, even though, like you mentioned, I was learning one topic every day and therefore every month. I was never the same. So I always had something to talk about my experiences. Guess what? The challenge of 7 days never stopped. Nowadays, I have people that tell me, please, JJ, stop talking online. With the opposite extreme. But that identity had to shed. And then you have seen me now creating more content. And now you're seeing me in 2 facets. First, when I quit the corporate world, that was another one that was freaking scary. And I had to hold on to something that just the biology of, because biology is, I have this saying, which is fear is biological, courage is spiritual. Fear is biological, courage is spiritual. And I remember this same friend of mine, Ori, we are about to get into a Joe Dispenza retreat like the day before.
Can I
and
stop you for 1 second?
Yeah.
Because I didn't catch. You said it twice, but I still didn't catch. You said fear is biological,
Courage.
Oh, courage. Okay. Yeah.
Spiritual.
I thought you said core issue. Okay.
Yeah.
And see, this is the thing. Like, it's okay if you have to repeat something. It's not a big deal, right?
Right. It's amazing. Yeah. Because I think I'm using kind of a French accent. Le courage.
No. But it was important because if I didn't catch it, then maybe some other listeners didn't catch it, and I wanted to make sure. So
thanks for rephrasing. Yeah.
Courage
and courage
is
spiritual.
Okay, now go back and start your story again. Sorry.
Right. So for years, I was telling myself that I was going to quit this tech job and I was going to do the thing that I wanted to do, which at that moment I didn't know what it was. I knew that it was learning and sharing. That's the only thing I knew. And I remember I wrote my resignation letter like 5 years before to this event. So the resignation letter is ready on the mail draft, about to get sent, right? And again, you know where all the fear went, right? All of it is here. But for 5 years, that email was stagnating there. 5 years, T.
Wow.
And so
5 years.
I'm about to get into this Joe Dispenza retreat with my friend Ori, and we're walking on Marco Island, beautiful beach, and we're getting to his car, and he says, JJ, you've been telling me this for years that you're gonna quit. And I remember I just stopped. I looked at him. I grabbed my phone. I did not even go to the mail. I went to the chat that we had with the team, and I texted the manager saying, you and I knew that this was going to happen. I'm quitting. Wow. And I hit send. And I look at Ori. He looks at me. What did you do? And woo, this flow of energy went through my body immediately. Like, that's the moment that another identity shed. That's the moment that another identity just was gone.
Wow, that's powerful. Yeah. Feel the fear and do it anyway. I remember that book title.
And I had no plan. I had no much savings. I have not a structure. And I said, I'm going to find the way to make it, or allow the way, or I'm going to make the way, find the way, or even just allow the way to find me. Because I'm going to find a way to make this happen. And now that is what also provided this courage of like, okay, if I'm learning all of this, this is not only about me. And one of the things, I don't know if I told you, but it is, I had this realization that every cell in my body had a function, has a purpose. Every cell in my body. Even when a new cell gets created in the spine, it's waiting latent to get programmed with a specific purpose and go and do it. So in my mind, I said, okay, working for a company or any tech company, that's not really the purpose. It's stagnating this inner purpose. The fulfillment is not there. And so when I started tapping into, first of all, nervous system optimization, and with all the things that I've learned, tapping into, okay, how will I help a person to upgrade, to get unstuck, and if they're leaders, they're going to impact their clients, their families, their teams. So I said, okay, this is turning into something interesting. Later, I started realizing that the way to go there has been through breath work. This is one vehicle, not the only one, but it's one of the main vehicles because it regulates the nervous system. You have experienced it. You have experienced it with me, right?
Yes,
And
which I want to share in a minute. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
yeah. So what I realized is that even though I don't have I mean, there is no other human optimization strategist. If you Google it, I'm the only one in the planet because I created that title. At this moment, that is the air quote identity that fits kind of what I'm doing. But eventually it's going to change for sure. And what you've seen me doing there, T, in the sessions, it is I am there not for myself. I'm there to serve other people. And so it's like, how can I help support the growth of that nervous system or that group of people in that room to actually allow them to release stress and get connected mind and body again. It's interesting. I never thought about myself becoming or being, some people have called me conscious leader, stuff like that. I'm like, what?
Cult
I never
leader?
thought that
No,
about myself.
I'm just
A cult
joking.
leader? Yeah.
The
I
cult
call
of
it, it's funny because
JJ.
no, I call it the cult of oxygen. Did I tell you that?
Oh, the
Right,
cult of
sometimes I got new
oxygen.
people to
Oh,
this.
that's
Yeah.
fun. I like that.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, and I so tell people, "Hey, welcome to the cult of oxygen," right? And everyone just cracks up.
Yeah, I mean, you have that energy that people want and feel, and it connects to them and it reaches them. And when you said, I love the simplicity of like, you're all about learn and share, learn and share. And it's interesting because also sometimes when I would describe my spiritual journey, I'll tell people in the beginning, I was just taking in, like when we first kind of awakened spiritually, we're just hungry, we're thirsty. And back in the day, it was like reading, reading, reading. And now it might be watching videos or listening to
Yeah,
podcasts or whatnot, but taking it in, taking it in, taking it in. So this is like the breathwork metaphor. Learn is taking it in, inhale, learn, take it in,
thank you.
exhale, share. And so it's really cool. Like the breath work, it makes sense as a metaphor for who you are, the
Wow.
inhale
Yeah.
and the exhale, take it in, share, learn, share, learn, share.
Wow.
I
Oh,
just
you're
love that.
blowing my mind. You're blowing my mind. Thank you. It's because, yeah, anything that gets inside of the body doesn't go the same way. We transform it, we metabolize it, and it comes in a different way, right? So, all of the things that I have learned and the ones that I'm still learning, first of all, the learning doesn't come from the sense of not enoughness. It now comes from a sense of how is this piece of information that I'm learning going to support someone else? I don't know when, I don't know how, I don't know who, but it's going to serve someone. So my learning has acquired a completely different way of a driver, completely different driver. Yeah.
Yeah, even people talk about the whole spiritual journey as the in breath and out breath of God or the divine, right? When the divine wanted to know itself, it split off into, as a soul, it split off into
Mm,
these different pieces to go into the manifest world. And then
mm,
evolution through reincarnation is us feeling called back. We feel called back to the divine
mm.
through our incarnation. So there's this long cycle of the in breath and the out breath of the divine, and our soul journey is a reflection of that. So I love how that all connects.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's something that I'm discovering throughout the practice, and also because of this drive for, first of all, learning and improving things, kaizen, right? This
Hmm.
Japanese philosophy of continuous improvement. It is the sessions, for people that attend the sessions, they realize that first of all, they're never the same. Second, that they're always an evolution in the process. And even myself, this is not something that I will tell other people, but you're my friend. I don't know if I told you that I have retrospectives after every session, meaning I debrief what went amazing, what to improve, and I take notes. And I'm now even using AI to help me do that. Imagine that. So I'm using the same iterative process that nature is using, basically. And so I know how to create the space so that the people there can feel safe enough to go inside their own psyche, their own soul, their own spirituality, connect their spirituality, and having transpersonal experiences. And then I am the one who, at the end of the session, is like, okay, guys, what did you learn? What did the spirit inside of you, that internal inner intelligence, told you, I want to learn? So it's like a co-creative experience. I may be helping them to get there, but they come and then they share stuff that it is mind blowing, right?
Yeah. So you had been inviting me for a while, like, oh, you have to come and take my class. I was like, yeah, I have to. But, busy life. And then finally, the last time when we had met for a meal, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this and put it on my calendar and showed up to your breathwork class at Casa de Luz. And it was amazing. Yeah. I think what you're saying, which I think is true for most spiritual experiences or healing experiences. Of course, this is a spiritual podcast, so I'm constantly referring to spiritual. And of course, you could say everything is spiritual, right? The physical body, the mind, the emotions, it all comes from the one source. But anyway, people often say that healing is about holding space, holding safe space, like you're saying, creating a container. And so just
Yeah.
you, in all of the work that you've done and in your own beingness, when you show up and your embodied beingness, holding this energy, holding this frequency, it creates this amazing container for everyone that shows up and is open to receive that or flow with that. Yeah, when I went to your breathwork class, towards the very end, when we finally hold the last big breath, oh my gosh, I just had this wave of just incredible, huge, universal love that just brought me to tears in the best way. Those incredible tears of awe and wonder and gratitude and humility that I'm here connected to the divine in all these different forms and expressions. And yeah, I was just so overwhelmed with love. And I just felt like, oh, I just want to share this with everyone in the room, with everyone in the planet, and let it radiate out. My heart center just really opened. And it was just so beautiful. And thank you for that.
So I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's cool is we're all in the same space together, and yet everyone's going to have
Ah,
a different experience, their own unique experience, like you said. And we're having our individual, this kind of goes back to what I was saying about the Aquarian age. Collectively, we're creating something all together, and then also individually. So we can each individually have our experience and get what we need from the same thing. And it could be very different, and yet we're also all weaving that in together for the whole.
yeah, yeah. So this is so interesting that you mentioned that. So I'm doing also research on all of this, like cognitive, I would call it the citizen science at this moment. We still have a small group of neuroscientists that are helping with this, but it's more of a private research more than through a university or anything like that. So I'm not saying this in order to just simplify the breathwork part, but instead like trying to figure out what is happening, because we're having people that have, this is interesting, T. Over the last few years, I've noticed that within a session, some people will report having visions, let's say, of a butterfly, and the other person's like, hey, I had a butterfly too, and then a third one has a butterfly within the same session. Or another theme could be, I felt this specific color, and this other one, and this other one, like things that are so common, but they change through seasons. So I'm like, holy moly, what's going on here, right? And part of even my curiosity is getting into, are we creating something in the collective way in practices like this? Very likely it is. Now, that doesn't mean that I need to be, or that I want to be specific and say, this is how we're going to create this thing and this thing. No, but instead, how do we continuously promote the safety, not only cognitive, but bodily and spiritually, for people to drop into those states of pure bliss, of pure even sorrow, sometimes pure grief, but allowing those sensations and emotions to flow through the system. And at some point, their inner intelligence, they're like, poof, starts getting downloads, getting messages. And that's changing things, right?
Yeah, I think we're in a really powerful time where more people are becoming open to alternative methods of healing. And there are more people who are willing to do research on it to sort of help to back up. There's all of this anecdotal evidence that people have of their experiences. And then there's also other researchers that are doing it maybe in a more scientific way that is allowing for as all of this information is getting shared. I just think that there are going to be big breakthroughs, not just in technology, which we're seeing, but also in the fields of alternative healing and then in spirituality as well. And everything is moving so fast, and energy and frequencies are shifting very fast, that it's just mind-boggling. Like, if we have this conversation 5 years from now, I think we're going to look back and be like, whoa, who would have imagined all of that unfolded in 5 years?
This is what I called, we're getting into the era of the techno-mystical, right? We're using highly developed technologies from human-made with mysticals that have been there even prior to humanity. And when both of them are getting combined, this is crazy because, for example, let me give you an example. Right now, I don't have one of the devices right now. Maybe it's there in my backpack. But we can track their heartbeat. We can track their brain waves. So we know when a person is getting into an altered state of consciousness. And now, what does that mean, altered state of consciousness? Meaning dropping fear-based or the survival-based mechanisms of this system, going back to the fear is biological, and allowing this connection with something that is way, way beyond what we can even think of, right? So that connection is what is bringing everything in alignment. Now, if we want to go into the technical, what is happening is that I know that with the blueprint that I created, with the protocols that I created and that we're refining with my team, first of all, we get people through breathing patterns into, there's a dysregulation between the brain and the heart. So first of all, we're regulating through breathing both things. So they get in alignment at some point. So it's like, great, now we're getting into the same wave, but it doesn't end up there. At some point, the entire room starts breathing in sync. So
Mm.
sometimes I will be in the middle of a 30, 35 people room. Let's say that's kind of a small class. I would say, inhale, inhale, and that will shut up, and you can hear the entire room. So that means that all of them individually have synced up, but also as a collective, they have synced up.
That is super cool. It makes me think of that David Hawkins book. Is it Power versus Force, where he talks about
Powers of the force.
the different lux, the different states and
Yep.
levels going up in consciousness, and how whatever this higher level, like one person's frequency could affect like hundreds or thousands of people. And so it makes me think of, if we all sync up, and if there's one person that's leading it or facilitating it that's at this higher consciousness level, how it could just share, or everybody gets a download or transfers in the field.
It's funny that you're mentioning that because I have one thing I didn't tell you about this one, but it's called the Oxygen Experience. It's my signature event. Long story for how it goes, but guess what? It is based on power versus force,
Oh,
and we're
wow.
getting people
I didn't know
through.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's so
we're
funny.
getting people through several emotions that, and
Uh-huh.
then I'm using more technologies. Breathwork is one of them, combined with other ones, hypnosis, etc. Over there. But it's funny that you mentioned that one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Over the years that we've known each other, I've always really been conscious of how you come from a very yang perspective for the most part, or you come from a more yang dominant. I'm saying yang instead of masculine because even though you're in a male body and I'm in a female body, I'm not talking about biological gender, right?
Yeah,
We're talking about
yeah.
polarity energies, and we all have both the left brain yang kind of energy and we have the right brain yin energy. And like I remember one time, so you've always been about perfecting things and improving them, which is awesome. But I can remember, I don't know if you still do this, but at one point you had your whole day, like every single minute pretty much optimized. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I could not live like that. To me, that feels so confining. But for you, it was like, oh, this is how I can make the absolute best use of all of my time to have exactly optimized and planned out. But anyways, so you were always coming, not always, but you were generally coming from that perspective. And I was kind of like, yeah, I'm in the flow. I'm just going to see what I feel like working on right now. And yet we both have been able to honor each other's polarities or a different approach and kind of get something from each other. Yeah, but it seems like maybe you're more in the flow of that, or do you still have every moment of your day
Am I still
figured out?
OCD? You're asking
I
me,
would
am I
think
still
that
OCD?
I can't give you a diagnosis or label it, but
I can do it myself, but that's how, it's so funny. I was having so much, I found so much rejoice in doing that. I said, this is amazing. And it worked until, guess what happened? It did not work anymore. And instead of
Mm.
just living, I was just over engineering my life. So this is
Yeah.
what I call pendulation. That's what I call
Hmm.
pendulation, meaning we find something that works for us, whether it is workout, whether it's a meditation, a spiritual practice, whatever, until, yeah, this is working amazingly, until guess what happens? It doesn't work anymore. And
Hmm.
was like, oh, screw this. So we want the opposite way completely, many times. And it's like,
Hmm.
oh, now this is going to work. Yay! The other one was, the other version, sucked. This one started working until what happens? It does not work anymore, right? And the majority of the humans, that's when they stop. It's like they found themselves stuck into these 2 points without realizing that actually we can get the best out of the first one, the best out of the second one, and create a third behavior. So in this case, for example, thankfully you notice that when at that time it started with something as naive as, oh, I'm gonna track 6 categories in my time, like workout and work and chill and sleep, and like 4 or 5. It ended up with 36 friggin'
You're such an
categories.
overachiever.
Yeah, that did not work. That did not work. Yeah, yeah. So for all your audience, you can find more of what I do in the experiments that I do in the newsletter, right? So I confessed in that in one of the newsletters, I said you can track your time, but just don't go beyond 5 categories. Otherwise, you're wasting your life, right? Now, the opposite, the complete opposite way is like having no structure at all, and it also works, but we need to apply in that case a critical thinking, like, okay, in what scenarios having a structured flow works, and in what other ones having a fully structured works? Because if we hold on to either one in the wrong context, we're equally dysfunctional. It's maladaptive.
Mhm.
So for me, going back to what you mentioned, I thankfully over the last few years I was able to gain more flexibility in my thinking. And also I would say flexibility in the way that I was feeling emotions, because my emotions were so constricted. I mean, I used to be a tech leader and I used to put my emotions completely aside. But
Mhm.
now, since I started embracing emotions, I started connecting mind and body better. At any moment, I can notice, for example, when I'm constricting the body and I'm not breathing, I'm like changing the posture, and that is becoming a fun practice.
Yeah, and I was
Hmm.
thinking about this pendulation. Is that what you called it? Anyway, swinging of
Yeah,
the pendulum.
pendulation.
How Yeah, so then sometimes people, so they go one extreme and then they go the other extreme, and then people say, "Oh, the middle path, where you're right in the middle." And I think sometimes that makes sense, and sometimes it just makes sense to be able to have the dance that maybe
Hmm.
a certain part of my day has a lot of structure, and then a certain part of my day has no structure. It doesn't have to
Yeah.
be like, oh, it's always equally half and half. And this is for any polarities, which I think talking about polarities is very pertinent just because in the world right now there's a lot of polarization. And so
Mm,
rather than thinking that we have to choose a side and be extreme, maybe
mm,
sometimes we're one side and then other times we're other side, or maybe in some situations we're one and in other
yeah.
situations or areas of our life we're another. And just to have the fluidity and to see the value in both sides without rigidly attaching to, and this could be any qualities. This is the whole thing about
Mm,
incarnating as a human and exploring being different qualities, is it's not just like there's one side of the spectrum that's right and there's another side of the spectrum that's wrong. It's
yeah.
just being able to, like you said, it's like your white t-shirt, right? Maybe today is a white
Mm,
t-shirt and maybe
yeah.
tomorrow is a black t-shirt, or maybe tomorrow's a colorful
Or
t-shirt,
tank top,
or yeah,
whatever, right? So
or
something different.
shirtless
Yeah.
or whatever.
Or shirtless,
or
whatever.
or
Yeah.
maybe half of today you wear the white t-shirt and then
Yeah.
tonight you go out and you put on a fancy shirt. So anyway, just
Yeah.
not being attached, like white
Mm.
t-shirt's always the best way to go, or tank top's always the best way to go.
And one of the things that I personally am grateful for our friendship over the last few years is that thanks to our friendship and our connection is that I was able to expand my awareness to other ways of living. You and I have very different ways of living. So thankfully I was not stuck in my ways of being and I learned from you. That doesn't mean that I will go fall in with that, but you allowed me through your own experience to see, oh, this is another flavor of living. And so that helped me to actually or like melt down a little bit of the rigidity in the mind and allow myself to, oh, this is so interesting, right? And that's the reason it's not only the work within oneself that we need to pendulate or to experiment all of this. Thankfully, we can have healthy connections that allow us to see stuff like that and saving us time.
Yeah, well, it's so interesting that you said this rigidity within yourself because I've always felt you're so open minded. You just come from curiosity and you're open just to kind of hearing another person's perspective and exploring that. And I think that's why you just keep continuing to grow and evolve
And
because most people aren't willing to do that to the extent that you do.
I can tell you one thing, that is very open, but at some point that also became rigid, meaning I couldn't stop myself from learning in that way, in that format. That's what became rigid. So it wasn't the thinking, but the process itself. And I got myself locked into that, but I said, but I have to keep doing it. Who says that, right?
Right.
And especially as an entrepreneur, I need to be way more flexible, especially when things are not going at all the way that I want it. And by the way, changing to being a full-time entrepreneur has been one of the most transformative times of my life. And equally, I would say business is a spiritual game. Business is a spiritual game. I have learned so much about myself and have grown thanks to taking that action that started there in Marco Island now.
Well, years ago, back when I was in the corporate world and I had a sort of a mentor, and he was really into day trading. And he also was very open to spirituality and was like the only person in my corporate job that I was talking to about my spiritual journey. And so even when I left, we kept in touch every now and then. And the way that he would talk about day trading, I kept telling him, that's a spiritual path. And what I realized, like I said, with acting too, is it's not what you do, right? It's the consciousness behind it. So anytime anyone's really reflecting through whatever they're doing, that could be being a janitor and mopping the floor and what you learn through the strokes of mopping the floor. It doesn't really matter what it is, right? It's really the consciousness that we bring to it. And so I think there have been all of these iterations of JJ, as we just mentioned, and there will continue to be, just like there'll be different iterations of Tiana. And yet, because we come from this perspective of wanting to reflect, wanting to grow, wanting to help others, as long as we maintain that, it's always going to be a spiritual path, whatever we're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, the self-exploration is the ultimate spiritual path. We will never fully know ourselves, and for me, that's the game. That is to make it playful for me.
Yeah, and I love the word playful. It doesn't get enough credit. And a lot of times people think that spirituality is this heavy, serious thing, which of course, there are there are parts of the heaviness and seriousness, but also the play. There's so much playfulness, like when I connect to spirit guides, there's a lot of playfulness as well. And again, it's about that balance, right? It's like when it's time to be serious and focus, do and give yourself time to play because our souls, our spirits, yeah, they like to create, they like to enjoy and interact. And I think that's one of the things, like you and I both have a lot of energy and a lot of excitement and passion about whatever we're
Yeah,
doing. And I think we've always, when we get together, we kind of feed off of that. We share different things with each other. And then, at least for me, when I leave, I always feel pumped. I always feel really energized and
likewise.
inspired. So I love that
Yeah.
about our connection.
Yeah, likewise. I really appreciate it. I know that over the last few years, we have exchanged information and ideas and stories that have, in my case, your stories have inspired me so much, T. And obviously, through the podcast, you're also supporting other people in their own paths. And if some of the stories that we're talking about today inspire them, go for them, right?
Yeah, thank you. So, one of the things I appreciate about your flavor of spirituality is something when we were talking about you coming on here, and I was like, oh, what is it you want to talk
Yeah.
about? And you're like, basically practical spirituality. And I was like, yes, because I'm super woo, right? I'm super, and I love the whole mystical thing, but I'm also actually very practical. Like, even though I'm guiding people into past lives or guiding people to talk to their spirit guides, I keep always wanting to bring it down to, okay, what can we take from this and apply to your life now? How can we
Mm,
apply this to your life now? And I think you can't help but think that way because, again, you have that Kaizen approach, like you said, wanting to
yeah.
improve. How can we grow? And so, what would you say for people who are wanting more practical spirituality in their life? What would you recommend?
To become more an experimenter or a citizen scientist where n equals 1 is the same when we are the guinea pig and at the same time the researcher. What does that mean? When we go into the spiritual realm, we're not just chilling there and allowing the body to soothe and then we come back online. No, no, no. Usually we have insights, we have downloads, we have new connections, we have glimpses of, oh, this is not working and I need to change this. And once we have those downloads, we can just let them sit there and do nothing, which I don't consider that spirituality, but more a mental bypass, or at least mental. It's like having a rush of sugar. It's like, oh yeah, that was nice, and then we let it go, right? But in this case, okay, how can I apply this download in a small experiment? Maybe I realize that in my spiritual practice, I got this download that I need to be better with boundaries, let's say. And sometimes the idea of being better with boundaries in the outer world is discombobulated. This could be too big. Now, how do we make it small enough? And small experiments, let's say a 7-day experiment, 10-day experiment of, oh, I notice that I do not set proper boundaries in these situations or with these people. What would happen if for 7 days I do it? Right, and to the level of degree that a person can do it with the other person, telling them, hey, let me experiment with this, like being the actor of something. But having that back and forth of a new behavior, of a new way of being. And now that I think about, we've been talking about identity, and it's like, how do we expand that identity in a safe way, in a safe container? Our nervous system does not work from the moment that, okay, we got a download and then we're going to switch the pattern like if we would be an AI and then we keep operating this way. No, no, there's a back and forth also. And especially once we have had a profound spiritual experience through any kind of modality, it may be very jarring for the system to put the new behavior out there, not knowing if it's going to work or not. As I mentioned, fear is biological. So there may be this rubber band effect that gets the nervous system back into the previous state, and the spiritual person will say, oh no, this is not going to work for me, even though yet internally they know that they need to take that path. So those little experiments, what I've seen is that work wonders for a person, because it's a controlled environment, it's a controlled experiment, and if it didn't work, okay, it's just 7 days or so, right? Or we can pull the short circuit button.
I love that idea. It's funny because I will recommend stuff like that to my clients, but I don't really do like I love the 7-day, the idea of a 7-day experiment because it's so non-threatening. The whole commitment thing of like, oh gosh, doing this for however X, like 100 days, that might seem like too much, but like 7 days, I
Daunting.
think that you can try something for 7 days and just be mindful and pay attention and see, and you'll kind of get a sense of whether that resonates for you or whether that's working for you or not. But yeah, I often talk to clients about scaling things down to baby steps because people just get so overwhelmed, and a lot of times people have black and white thinking. It's like this all or nothing, and so they won't try anything because they make it so big in their head when this little
The risk.
experiment, and if you think of an experiment, even though sure, when people, scientists and stuff, when they go in with an experiment, maybe a lot of times they're sort of hoping to see a certain outcome, but still have to go in and just be open to whatever. So the experiment idea is just to go in and be open. And when you have the container of just 7 days, I think most of us are like, okay, I can be open around this for 7 days, right? Like you said, like your 7-day social media post or whatever. And then just knowing like, okay, after the 7 days, it'll be over. Okay. Yeah. It's just, it feels really non-threatening and digestible and doable. So I challenge anyone just to try something small, like some area where you want to grow in your life right now or where you feel stuck, to try something small just for 7 days, like JJ's recommending, and see what happens.
The second factor there, T, is first of all the person experimenting with, let's say, this T-shirt is like, Peter, I need you to try this T-shirt for 7 days. I don't like it. I don't like it, but I want to try it. Let's just 7 days. And you said it is non-threatening. Okay, I'll do it for 7 days. Then the next thing that majority of people forget in the realm of a spiritual or pragmatic spirituality, as I would put it, is that when we change, we're forcing other consciousness to change. And that's going to create friction. And that's also part of this rubber band effect, because if we've been behaving in one way and the people close to us got used to this behavior and then we switch it, they're going to present resistance, maybe cognitively or even unconsciously, but there's going to be resistance. So something worth mentioning there is that it usually requires between 5 to 7 touch points of the other person to understand that, oh, this is the new me. oh, this is the new me, and they will whether accept it or reject it or leave it. So now that's up to the other person. So that's when this game becomes tricky. So that's another nuance that we have to be mindful of, which is that by changing ourselves, we're changing the context, and there's going to be friction. That doesn't mean that we're going to have exactly what we want, the output that we wanted. Relationships are going to get broken apart. Other relations are going to get created, and that's part of exploration, right?
Yeah, and so friction doesn't have to be bad.
It's
Yeah,
not.
it's the process of creating something new. Things have to shift and change. And so, yeah, we have to get sort of comfortable with that we can be okay when there's some friction and we can learn ways to work with that. And otherwise we'll be very stagnant. We'll be very stuck if we're just
Mhm.
avoiding, we're people pleasing, or we're avoiding making the
Right.
change to try to not rock the boat. And yet I think we're in some major turbulence as far as rocking the boat. I don't think people are going to be able to let's play it safe under the radar anymore, just because everything is shifting as it needs to, because so many things have not been in the highest and best on the planet. And so we're in this kind of breakdown mode. And yet, if we have the experience, or if we don't, to allow ourselves to get to have the experience of, oh, I can be okay with friction. I trust and know that I'll be okay. Then we're going to be able
Yeah.
to navigate all of this time of massive transformation that we're in and that's ahead much better. So I love that you recommend that.
Yeah. The friction is a precursor of fire, and fire is change. So many people, including myself, I used to avoid conflict. Now it's not that I look for it, but what it means that I am better at navigating conflict because I know that something better is going to come out of that. And as you mentioned, for example, and I was thinking about this actually before I made this metaphor. I was at a runners club the other day, and there was this guy who has been coming with a long hair. He just shows up with very short hair. And I'm like, hey, good to see you. So it was first shocking, right? Like, because I saw this guy several times with very long hair, and now he has a very short haircut. And I said, like, hey, you look good. And the guy's like, yeah, I feel good, thank you, right? So it took me like 2-3 minutes to get used to his new look. But it was so interesting. That's when we are doing also in spiritual realm. Sometimes we are all hairy and we're taking a trim or a spiritual trimming, I would call it. And so there's going to be a little bit of this distortion the way the other people saw us, or there's going to be a little bit of shock. I would say, I would not even shock, but they're going to be surprised. And now that's the level of depth of connection that we can have. For some people, we can tell them, I'm testing this, I'm experimenting with this new way of being. Would you be open to just be patient with me for 1 week, 7 days? For other people, it would mean less than that, or it could be even more in depth. I have this depth, this very deep spiritual experience, and I decided to change this and experiment for a little bit. And they may understand. Other people may not be that close to being able to relate at that level, and you can say just simply, hey, I'm planning to experiment with that. Would you give me some grace if something changes? And the majority of people are going to say, oh, of course, because they're also curious to know what you're going to come up with. So that's when we start using our new spiritual expanded or upgraded level, deploying it safely in the new environment. Oh my God, that was so technical.
That's you.
Deploying the spiritual.
I want to switch gears a little bit and just,
Sure.
I want to hear more. I don't know if maybe I've asked you this before. What is your sort of spiritual awakening? A lot of people have some sort of moment when they shifted and focused more spiritually. Sometimes it comes through a crisis, or sometimes it's a gradual thing. When would you say you started to really be more interested in spiritual things, or when would you say you started on a spiritual path in this lifetime?
In my case, as the majority of people that I know came through crisis, whether it
Hmm.
is breakup of relationships, the other ones that have had a profound impact in my spiritual path have been plant medicine. Those one has
Hmm.
been huge. That's a technology that works for this nervous system.
Mm.
And once I had those experiences, I could not unsee what I've seen. I'm like, I remember my first ayahuasca experience. I experienced love for the first time in my life, and
Wow.
not a cognitive love. It was something that was so profound that I could not see it anymore, right? And I remember I left 2 days after the ceremony. I'm walking on the street, and I could feel the love in other people. I can feel myself radiating love, and like we are one. We just forgot that we are one. That was one big moment. Then the other ones have been mostly, in my case, around relationships, because I am healing over the years some wounds in terms of relationship, maybe
Mhm.
most likely from this lifetime, and I have had the chance to have those relationships or situations where those wounds got reactivated. Thankfully, even through the pain that we all experience, in my mind is, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? And that is what led me into paths of meeting mentors, finding new modalities, and so on and so forth. So that's a second source of, I would call it, I don't call it spiritual awakening, but you're right, it could be something like that. I call it being more in touch with myself. I call it being more in touch with myself. Not only with the body, but also with like, oh, what is the body experiencing? What's the mind experiencing? So creating some healthy detachment from the body and the mind, and therefore what I think what remains is what is going to transcend both of them. So that's how my journey moved through the years.
Yeah, amazing. And so tell us the things that you are doing now that maybe if people who are listening are interested and they want to have an experience with you or be facilitated in breath work or be mentored, or what are you offering these days?
Wow. What am I offering? That's an interesting question.
Or did I word it in
Yeah,
in a weird way?
no one ever worded it for me like that. I think I'm gonna hire you for my marketing team. What I do is, this is my passion, and you will see it. I came to optimize 1% at a time, one human at a time. So every day I wake up and it's like, who's gonna get optimized? First of all, myself, right? Otherwise, I will be fooling myself. And then, how am I going to support other people? And now these days, it is. I've created this model that is a framework called the Human Ops Framework, which is the physiology, psychology, and the emotional aspect all combined. And you can see it on the website, jjruescas.com. We can have the links below. And I remember, before I go into answer your full question, T, is someone asked me. So it's an infinite loop. Basically, if you see it on the website, it's an infinite loop. And someone came and asked me one day, and so you said physiology, psychology, and emotions. Where is the spiritual aspect? And I said, where do you think that infinite is living on? Where was it created? And the person was like, oh crap, I never thought about it, right? So I don't talk about spirituality, but at the end of the day, that's what is happening there. That canvas where all of that framework and the pieces were created is the spiritual framework. We cannot deny that one. So going back to the point is that I get that framework. I use that framework as a very malleable, flexible playground for every nervous system to find what works for them to reconnect and reignite their purpose. Reconnect with themselves, reignite their purpose. And I can tell you, I work with leaders in all sorts of technical, non-technical, architectural, business, or marketing, etc. And all of us are looking for something very deep, fulfillment, a spirit that feels so fulfilled that if today would be the last day, it would be an amazing way to live. So what I do is, whether it's through breathwork, through these one-on-one experiences, or through just creating fun experiences where a person like gets into this awe or wonder, say like, oh, I never thought about that. Oh, that's what I offer.
Hmm.
Environment so that the person can find that wisdom within themselves. Not that I'm going to give it to them, but I create those environments so that they can find it within themselves.
Beautiful. Awesome. Is there anything that we haven't touched on, or do you have any last message that you wanted to share with listeners?
Yeah, take a deep inhale. The majority of people forget about breathing. So the moment that I bring back the respiration, they were like, so if you were one of those guys that were holding, or girls that were holding their breath, just take a deep inhale and just smile. That's the only thing that brings awareness to the present. And from there, we can take action into any other way. But besides that, our conversation, as always, is amazing. I'm glad that finally we're recording this.
Yeah, I always feel like I could just talk to you for hours and hours. We always kind of just have to like cut it off at some point.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. It's been so much fun.